A big hello and a very warm welcome to Brand Equity with me, Sonali Krishna. Today I have a very special guest on the show and I'm going to be discussing dating apps and the impact it's had thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the guest I have on the show today is the global CEO of the biggest dating app in the world. Yes, you guessed it right. He is the TINDER CEO, Ellie Seidman. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the United States.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure. It's great to be here. Thank you as well.
Well, let me first ask you with how you're doing and how you're coping with the pandemic. I mean, it's tough on all of us, even personally. So before I get into how you're coping with the pressure as the CEO of TINDER, how are you coping working from home and, doing business from home?
Well, I think that, many of us have experienced the challenges of working from home. We've been very fortunate that, in Los Angeles, which is where I am based, we've actually had a relatively easy go of it. There's been obviously a lot of lockdown and social distancing, but all things considered, it's been relatively easy. I lived previously in New York for many, many years, and you saw all the visuals from New York, and that's been much more difficult there. We have an office there as well, and kind of the stress in New York has been harder, but in Los Angeles, it's been a little bit easier, to be very honest. Now, working from home, I think, gets a little bit repetitive is probably the easiest way to think of it.
That would actually be quite accurate. I don't know if you know, but in India, it's quite severe. We've been under lockdown for now over 70 days. And so it's been very tough here. But having said that, let me get to, the crux of this discussion, which is really your headline thoughts on how this has impacted dating apps, because, with socializing itself now coming under the scanner, this is going to become extremely difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the biggest thing we've seen, right, is that when you have social distancing, it doesn't mean you don't want connection. In fact, I think on the contrary, it's been the case that people want connection now more than ever. It can be, social distancing, obviously very important for the health crisis, but obviously a big consequence for people who are lonely, for people who would like connection. And so we've very much seen that, and we've seen that around the world now. And, it follows some typical trends in terms of how a place is impacted. If you look at New York about a month ago was probably at its worst. It's probably better now, not fixed, but better. And you see that change in engagement in the app as things change. But I think, the overall story has been that, people really want to find connection. Now, in a world of social distancing, that means chats, that means finding, somebody on FaceTime, but you still want connection.
Sure. What would you say would be, the trends that you're seeing across dating apps, and of course Tinder being the leader in terms of people connecting, and what is the next step? What's the plan? What is the ideation, at the top across this space in terms of, I can swipe and I can get a match with somebody and I can chat with him, but where do I go from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll frame this by thinking about first, who is Tinder? What is the Tinder community? We're an app, a global app. We're primarily focused on young people. We think of it as, Gen Z, 18-year-olds to 25-year-olds. Tinder is an app for people who are older than 18. And so for our young members, this is a very important part and phase of their life. And, we're really the only app that is focused on, that part of life. We have members certainly who are older than 25, but more than half of our members are between 18 and 25. And so that brings with it a really important phase of life. And, I think one of the things we've seen globally for this group, for this 18 to 25-year-old group in Gen Z, is that their experience arriving on an app like Tinder at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 25 is quite different than the generation before them. If you think about our young people today, young people have lots of digital tools inside of their social life from a pretty early age. And I think that's actually proving to be pretty consistent around the world. Increasingly, You have chatting, or you have things like FaceTime or social networks. And so by the time people arrive at 18 and they arrive on Tinder, they're already very accustomed now to working in a world, to kind of experiencing a social life that is in a digital environment. And so that's, I think, a really big trend. And that's very different than where the world was, 7, 8, 10 years ago. There's been just a tremendously big change. The way I like to think of it is, in the mid 90s, you have the first internet, the information internet, and then you have the economic internet after that, right? Which is, how do I buy things in e-commerce? And of course, that's become incredibly important around the world, in India as well. Things like Flipkart. And the one that we operate in, which has really become enormous in the past, 10 years, is the social internet. And that's been a very, very big change. Today's 20 and 21 and 22-year-olds have a very different experience with digital social tools. And the way that is important for what we do is that the idea of connecting and having an emotional connection digitally is now possible. Now, of course, in our world, we think people do ultimately want to connect in the physical world. But we know that you can develop an emotional connection, and an important and valid and meaningful emotional connection, first in a digital social experience. And so that's something we've been seeing for some time. I would say that, I'm happy to talk about it, but we've seen that with COVID, it's being in some ways accelerated, and more people are learning about this.
How are you coping with the current situation and the new normal, which will emerge out of this? I believe that Tinder is looking in its second quarter to be looking at installing video chat. So I can get a match, and when I'm comfortable, I can video chat within the app. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's right. Yes, so we're going to release in the second quarter, to some group of our members, an opt-in experience with one-to-one video chatting. So if you remember, Tinder is a double opt-in system. It means when you match with somebody, both people have to agree. And then there will be a second double opt-in, a second mutual agreement for video, for one-to-one video. And so we're going to be releasing that on a test basis to some small set of our members later this quarter. And you should expect to see it, expand from there throughout the remainder of the year.
How do you think that this will help in terms of the third stage, where I would actually need to meet the person? Because finally, dating is meeting the person in the physical realm and taking it wherever both of you deem fit.
I think of it this way, right? We're seeing three big important trends right now that for our youngest members have actually been happening for some time. For Gen Z members, these three things are not very new, but they're being accelerated. And I think all of the ideas around one-to-one video are really a small part of this bigger story. The bigger story is that, it used to be that there was online dating and there was dating. There was online connecting and socializing, and there was socializing. And now those two things are the same. If you're one of our Gen Z members around the world, these two things, there isn't online dating and dating, there's just dating. The second, which I think is a really important idea, and you referred to it, is that we're familiar now with how to connect digitally. That idea of developing emotional connection, whether it's in video or it's in chat, is a big idea, and it's an important idea. Those connections, those emotional experiences are important and they're valid. And then, which is really interesting, and we're very inspired by, is you see a lot of people, hacking these social experiences in the digital world, whether that's, a trivia night or learning how to cook together in a video, or it's, we see in Silicon Valley now, Zoom Bachelor. They're taking the TV show idea, but making it an actual way to meet people in a kind of fun and entertaining way. And they're using, an enterprise video tool to make that work. And so we're really inspired by these hacks. And the reason we're inspired is because they build on something we've been working on for a long time, which is how do we create ways for you to hang out in the Tinder app, come to Tinder on a Sunday night, on a Tuesday night, and find people and hang out with them, chat with them, connect with them, have a shared experience. Now, the question of like, does it, will it go to the physical world? Yeah, we expect that for some people, it will eventually get there. But for an app like ours, the first step in that process is, how do I find people, develop rapport with them, develop connection with them, do that in a way that's easy to do, that's fun to do. And we think that these kind of activities that you see, whether that's a trivia night, or something else, whether it's people hanging out in Animal Crossing and having a date inside of the game Animal Crossing, we think those are really inspiring because they're fun and they're lighthearted, and there's kind of an activity to share in common with somebody else. And so this is, I think, a very big idea.
Essentially, what you're saying is dating has already moved, even before COVID-19 hit us, to the virtual realm. And people, a lot of dating may not essentially translate to the physical world. And a lot of dating actually is meant to be only virtual. Am I correct in that understanding?
I think it's something different. I think it's that that today, in today's world, for so many people, especially Gen Z around the world, it's that the first step in that journey is connecting in the virtual world, and how do you form connection there? One of the amazing things about Tinder, about the revolution of people meeting other people, looking for something more, and doing that inside of an app, inside of a global community. The amazing thing about that is we now have more options than we did. And that has been a tremendously good thing over the past 6, 7, 8 years. And it's a global phenomena. And it's particularly true for Gen Z, for young members. The second step after you find somebody is, how do you develop connection with them? We hear the following a lot from our members around the world. I met somebody, I matched with them on Tinder, I chatted with them a little bit, and then I went to the physical world, to meet them, to have coffee, and we didn't mesh. It wasn't a good connection. And we think that the next phase of innovation here is around, how do you actually help in that area, so that before they get to that coffee, we've helped them build rapport. And so we think of these things like a trivia night, or like what you're seeing with dates inside of Animal Crossing, as another step that you can do in the digital world that helps you develop connection, helps you develop rapport with that person before you get and meet them in the physical world. But we absolutely don't think that the physical world is going away. We think it's really important. We personally love the physical world. And so we think that most of the connections that matter will ultimately go to the physical world, yes, but we think there's a lot of innovation to be done to make the experience before you choose to go to the physical world one of richer connection, to do that in a way that's easier and fun, gives people something to talk about, something to do together. So that's really what the core and the big idea. And we think of that as the next major wave of innovation in the world of digital connection that we're in.
In terms of just COVID-19 impact, if I asked you to look at, let's say, behavior patterns and numbers in terms of how this has impacted March, April, May, have you seen people interacting more on dating apps at large? Have you seen that interaction come down? Because people are also going through, a lot of psychosomatic anxiety. Each one has a different experience, and it's hard for people in different ways. The impact on people actually logging on, is it more because people have more time, they're lonely? Has it reduced because people are more anxious?
I think that there isn't a one answer here. Probably if you had to have one simple answer, it's that in a time like this, you need connection more than ever. Now, what we've seen is that depending upon what part of the world you're in, and it really can be very city specific. We have a team in Seoul, South Korea. We have a team in Delhi. We have a team in Tokyo. These are Tinder teams, and we can actually, in talking to our teams, we see how the experience and the stresses of what's happening in the local community has varied a lot with time, which has been written about a lot in the press as well. So I would say that what we see is that when things are feeling their most stressful. For New York, and I lived in New York for many years, New York at its most stressful was probably a month ago. And there's clearly at that point a fall off in engagement. But it doesn't go to zero. There's still a lot of chatting, and in fact, the conversations are longer. There's more chats per person, but the engagement is a little bit lower. And then as the stress of the moment passes, it comes rebounding back, and you see that very clearly.
What are your predictions for the dating app industry once we see some semblance of normalcy?
Well, I think that there's like the short term and the long term. In the short term, there's going to be a really amazing and beautiful desire for people to find and connect, in that coffee shop, at that restaurant. That I think is the expected. Everything old will feel new again. I think the longer term is really interesting in terms of the ability to find other people, to control your own ability to find other people who are similar to you, who are looking for what you're looking for. That's been a huge change. It's been a truly global phenomena. It's especially true with 18 to 25-year-olds in Gen Z, but it's been true with people who are older as well. And that's been a huge change. The next wave, we're kind of leaving that first wave, where there are just many, many more people who are willing and decide to join a digital community like Tinder to meet new people. The next wave is what I was referring to before, which is we are going to now innovate in the area of, okay, we've met these people, those people are there, but how can we develop connection with them more and better, and how can the apps facilitate that, and how can Tinder do a better job? So I'm really, really excited by what I would call the second wave of Tinder, the second wave of this innovation.
Right. Overall, in terms of you being at the helm and being the CEO of the leading app in the world, what are the kind of challenges that you have had to face during these tough and trying times?
I think that the hardest thing, and this is not a how do you do the functional work, the hardest thing for us and for all teams is how do you deal with it psychologically and emotionally. It's a very stressful time. It's impacting our friends and our family and the communities in which we work. And so trying to help keep the team optimistic and looking forward. And also, of course, as a team, what can we do? How can we do our part? Whether that's our part of helping our direct community and helping each other as a team, or helping our members. And we were early in February and early March to telling our members, hey, let's be aware of these things. So those are some of the experiences we've had. I think we've been very fortunate in terms of the kind of work we do translating well. And I know that there are many who are far less fortunate, and I'm very concerned about the economic impact and the health impact for so many. And so this is a very trying time, but we've been very fortunate, all things considered.
Yeah, absolutely. If I had to ask you, what's the next big bet that Tinder is betting on and we should all look forward as consumers, what would you say?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are coming, in the short term. We have some small group of our members for the first time will get something called Global Mode, which is meant to help you connect to people who aren't nearby. I think that's really exciting. We talked about one-to-one video, again, coming on a test basis to some members in Q2. But I think that the big thing that we're really excited about, and this extends and builds on something we did in the US in the fall called Swipe Night, is the idea that you can come to Tinder and hang out and connect. In the fall, we ran something called Swipe Night. It's an interactive adventure. You actually come to Tinder. You basically are taken through a story where you get to make choices in that story. Each part of the story is a short video clip that we've pre-recorded. You are taken through the story and you make choices, and those choices in turn reflect something about you. And since the whole community around you, the whole Tinder community around you, is going through the same experience, it gives you something to talk about with them and bond with them and connect with them. And the goal there is to bring the whole community together to hang out and then give an activity that makes it possible to bond. And I think if you take that idea, which we already did in Swipe Night in the US in the fall, we'll have some version of that coming out later this year in other parts of the world, but expand that idea, the idea that we don't just go to Tinder to meet somebody and then we'll hang out with them a week from now or 2 weeks from now in the physical world. We can actually come to Tinder and hang out on Tinder. That's really the big idea. And I think that, and like I said before, the next wave.
From your younger years, not to say that you're old now, but when you were young and in the dating zone, how do you think love has actually changed, or even dating for that matter, love and dating from your years of dating to what we saw, let's say pre-COVID, to love and dating in the future?
Well, I think the wonderful thing about what we work on every day, and I say this from personal experience, is that the emotions and the psychological experience, the great parts of it, also the challenging parts of it, are much more the same than they are different. And that's, by the way, I think been true now for generations. Of course, there are some really profound changes that have happened, not just in the past 10 or 20 years, but really in the past 50 years around the ability to find new people. I think what's very different, that I've seen is that while the emotions have stayed the same, the ability to really find what you're looking for is much easier today than when I was dating. I was in New York City. It's a very big place. There's lots of people. And yet I would say, despite that, today, a decade later, 15 years later, it's much easier.
That is true. But if I had to ask you, if you were given another shot to date in today's world, would you like to try your hand at dating apps and find love via apps, or via Tinder, to be more specific?
I think that there's, I'm very happily married, and so with that caveat, that critical caveat that my wife would certainly not want me to be dating again. I think that in a lot of ways it has gotten a lot better. I think that what I was saying before, the ability to find what you're looking for, and we talked to a lot of our members, and in members who remember what it was like to date before they were willing to date with an app, and then after. And I would say the simplest way to say it is their options, their ability to really be themselves and find somebody who respects that person and validates that person has increased tremendously. And that's, I think, a really big and positive deal. And so I'm sure that, I'm very fortunate to have found love, and it took me a long time to find that love, but I was able to, and I'm very, very grateful and thankful for it. I'm certain that, apps help people find love. And I think all the evidence says so. We see very clearly that now in the United States, for example, more than half of the relationships that are out there are started in these apps, and that's and Tinder obviously the biggest one by far within that. So that's a really profound and important change, and I think it's all about finding what you're looking for, which has become a lot easier.
Sure. Cheers to the love you found, and cheers to love and dating in the post-COVID era. Here's wishing you lots of luck in your future endeavors and innovations going forward in the dating industry. And thank you so much for your time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy. Thank you so much, Ellie.
Yeah, thank you so much as well. And please stay healthy. I really appreciate the time.